IVM.
Simplifying your credit card payments with Cred is just smart. This IPL, pay your bills on Cred during the Cred Mega Jackpot Week from 27th April to 3rd May, and you stand to win some truly epic prizes like a Harley Davidson Fatboy bike or 10 years of free iPhones. Crazy jackpots unveiled every day and crazy offers from partner brands on specific days. So just download Cred.
Hello and welcome to Simplified. We are now the official FIFA podcast.
As in we kick the ball around from here to there with really no idea about what is going on in general.
Yeah. I think this would have been a good week to bring back Pepsi's that nothing official about it goes to.
Especially the official counts, but we shall not talk about that. We are Sep blabbering. I have very esoteric football knowledge.
Jack, you have to reserve all of this for the end of the podcast. This is what signals the end of the podcast, not the beginning.
We're going to try a Benjamin Button-like approach.
I haven't even seen Tenet.
So should we get Naren to say the stay safe now. Stay blattered.
No, see, the thing is, we want only people who really like Simplified to listen. If there are people who are in it for the, they've been attracted to the topic. Yeah, if they've been attracted for the topic or what, we want to lose those, what do you call those? Those flirters like in the beginning. We want only the true
dabblers. The dabblers.
Yeah, the dabblers. We want only the true loyalists. So yeah, if you listen this one, then you're a true loyalist.
Only people who will hodl Simplified should continue.
That's what. Yeah.
We are all about the hodlers.
Yeah. So people
hodlering ultra-crepidarians.
Yeah, and whoever
hodlering ultra-crepidarians.
Yeah. So whoever wants a simplified coin, please write into merch at simplified.py. PY, of course, for Polynesia. Okay. We should, before we talk about the topic of the day, we should start with the profundity.
Before that, actually, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead with the profundity. Yeah.
So, this is one of those simplified episodes where none of us had a profundity prepared. So, I actually thought that I would give you a profundity, not from a WhatsApp group, not from Google Images, but from Zoom. Yes, the software, the cursed software which all of us are forced to use right now. And what I like about Zoom, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, is it throws shade at everything before the Zoom window actually opens. So just before this recording, whenever you click on the Zoom link, it opens up first on the browser and then the software starts. This is the headline that comes up. Crystal clear audio, even if the lingo isn't. Zoom phone. Powering modern business communications. They might as well have said good morning at the end of this, I feel. And I noticed
Have a nice day.
Yeah, like you suckers are forced to using this and probably like...
No, they should have literally put all that stuff, this thing, and then Nach.
Perfect.
Oh man, but anyway, so today we are going to obviously over the last week football had its own version of a 90-minute civil war, so to speak, and so before we even begin, I think we can start with just a
is that what they call Manchester Derby now?
I think this had definitely got more drama than that, for sure. I think football has peaked this season. I don't think anything else is that's interesting at this point.
Use the word peak very carefully these days.
Yeah, true. Oh my God. Nice. That's sobering, Chuck. Thanks for that.
It's okay.
So let's all begin with just quickly introducing ourselves and a quick fact about the first football match that we watched. Mm-hmm. So yeah, my name's Shrikeet. Hi. My first real football match that I watched was a weird match, which actually in true to football form ended in 0-0. It was Liverpool versus Swansea. And that match was it was back in 2011. Kenny Dalglish was the manager, and funnily enough, presciently enough, the other manager was Swansea manager was Brendan Rodgers at that time. So what's that match? It was a very horrifyingly dull 0-0, and I don't know why, for some weird reason, I decided to support Liverpool after that match. But so that was my very first match. So you guys, go ahead.
Well, amazing. Hi, everybody. I am Chuck. And I don't know why we are introducing ourselves like 10 minutes into the recording, but hey, whatever floats anybody's boat. So,
football.
Whatever floats anyone's football. So, I'm surprised your first football match that you properly saw was 2011. That's a fair bit of fandom that's built up over a period of time.
It's not even been a decade since I'm a football follower.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, I think the first match which I saw properly was the World Cup final in 97. The one which Zidane had those two
97?
Headers. Yeah, 97. The France 97. 98, sir. 98. 98, sorry.
98, we were all Croatia fans, no?
Yeah, 98, we were all Croatia fans, correct. Davor Šuker, if I remember correct. Yeah, I remember all those matches fairly well. Even the one I really enjoyed the 2002 World Cup, the one in South Korea, thought that was very nice. The most memorable match, however, is a match I can't for the life of me remember who was playing, but it was in my I'm pretty sure Argentina or Brazil was involved in the next subsequent World Cup 2006. I remember it purely because I was watching it in the men's hostel in my college in Kerala. Kerala is football crazy, and I remember we had
you don't say.
Yeah, you don't say. We had this room. I remember with a TV where it was either a Brazil camp or an Argentina camp, and the entire room was just plastered with posters, slogans. It was beautiful. I used to go and watch games just for the atmosphere. So yeah, that's my
Yeah. So hi, I'm Tony, apparently, and the first real football memory that I have is in 1997. There was, I'm from Kerala, and in Cochin there's this famous stadium where Sachin has taken 2 fifers and stuff, which is also a multi-purpose like football stadium where Kerala Blasters play and stuff like that. In 1997, there was a Nehru Cup held in the Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, which is actually Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium is the MG Road of stadiums. Like across India, there are some 15 Jawaharlal Nehru football stadiums. But in that Nehru Cup, essentially 5 countries played, and India managed to qualify for the semi-finals despite not winning a single match. So we had 3 draws and 1 loss. But anyway, so we were all like very excited about the semi-final against Iraq, and my brother and I walked to the stadium. Just that it's a stadium with a capacity of 60,000 people. There were about 120,000 people there. They broke all the barricades on the sidelines and stuff like that. And I was a 9-year-old. I said, no, I don't want to watch this. And I had to actually make my way out of the stadium before the match began while people were pushing all the way in. And the cops are like, what are you doing? I'm like, no, I want to go out. It's like, no, don't go out. People are trying to get in. Anyway, so I walked back all the way without having to watch that
match. This is basically a memory of the most memorable match you didn't watch.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I remember paying, my house in Cochin isn't too far away from the stadium, and I remember going there to pay an electricity bill. So that might be the only stadium in the world where Sachin has taken a fifer and I have paid electricity bill. I don't know why. A random Cricinfo stat.
You got married near there only, no, Chuck?
Yeah, something. Yeah.
Wow, you watch football, pay electricity bills, and get married at the same place.
It's all multi-purpose in its full form.
So, I'm Naren, and I'm the football noob here. But I probably watched
the first ever football game.
Yeah, the first ever football match
between Pangaea and
no, there was that handkerchief that was tied into a ball.
When they still used to use decapitated heads.
Dark.
Naren's bladder is older than the football bladder. So.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Okay.
And
now that we have gotten through all of that. And for those who can see it, as you can see, Naren is rocking a very awesome Jose Mourinho look here today.
Yeah. So, Mourinho having finally attained peace. That's what Naren looks
like. Just for reference, Naren, since you don't follow football, he got sacked last week.
I know that. He's my son is a supporter of Tottenham Hotspurs, and he is.
Wow! Of course, then you will.
Your first memory.
That Jose Mourinho went actually.
Your first memory. Your first football memory.
Tracking back to your first football memory.
Oh yeah, I must have been 10 years old or so. And my early earlier experience of football before I watched this match was in school. So we had a recess period and they used to give one ball and about 50 children used to. So the only objective was to kick the ball. That was it. There was no purpose to the whole thing. It's not like life, right? So all of us go through life. We just want to kick the ball. There is no particular direction you want to go into, nothing like that. So yeah, that was us.
I revoke from before. Best profundity. Life is just like 50 kids running after football.
And
the objective
we
is
haven't even gotten to Naren gives life advice section.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was.
Yeah, I think this is it. Like life is just like playing football as a 10-year-old on a school ground. Objective is just to kick it.
Yeah. So I had an uncle, a distant uncle. I don't know exactly how he's an uncle, but he's an uncle, and he was from Kerala. He was probably from Cochin.
Vasco da Gama.
Yeah, he came to Bombay and he was desperate to go and watch a football match in this place called Cooperage Maidan. So Cooperage Maidan is the other end of town from where we live. And so I remember it was very exciting because I got to sit in a local train, go there. And I had watched sort of cricket. I had watched a cricket match before, and it was tumultuous. I've seen, like, it was just probably a silly Ranji match, but even that had a lot of animated support and whatever. This football stadium was dead, except for some 3 or 4 Kerala guys and 2-3 Goan guys who were extremely jumping up and down in their seats. But otherwise, and for the first time in my life, I saw a ball sort of going around and not everyone was chasing it. So that's my earliest memory. But I remember it as being very, very sparsely compared to a cricket game which I had seen. So I don't know, must be 6-8 people, 10 people in that stadium. That was it. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. This reminds me, all these grounds remind me of. So I play Football Manager on the computer, and you can now, in the last couple of years, you can play as ISL teams as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just randomly took I took Mumbai City and was playing, and they have these stock messages that they put the stadium name with, and it just looks damn funny when it's with the Indian teams. Like, for example, in the hallowed halls of D.Y. Patil Stadium. And he's like, my dream, there's some players been signed for Mumbai City. My dream has always been to play at D.Y. Patil Stadium. And I'm like, no, it's not. I don't think D.Y. Patil's dream was to play at D.Y. Patil Stadium.
Wow, Naren,
even D.Y. Patil doesn't dream of playing in D.Y. Patil Stadium.
Yeah.
Naren, wow, 6 to 8 people watching a football match. That's almost like 2021.
Wow, okay.
Okay,
so,
we should, coming back to 2021,
yeah,
Shriketh.
Coming back to 2021, and with the pandemic going on and this huge recession and generally the whole world going in different ways, football was like, everything's going too normally, so why should we also be left behind? So football also decided to throw a small civil war in there, and in the true spirit of trying to keep the attention of all the goldfish of this goldfish attention span generation. They wrapped it up within 2 days. So
it's nice. It's like an Instagram story controversy.
Yeah.
Does it drag on for too long? Like this Rafale deal, I've lost interest in it purely because it's gone on for too damn long. Like, how many decades has it been? Controversies means crisp to the point, resolve quickly, and move on to the next one. I like.
I mean, when
controversy very efficient.
Very efficient controversy. Yeah.
Yeah. When we conceptualized, I was like, okay. So when this started, I was like, oh, this has to be a simplified episode. So I started jotting points down, and I had these points, and I'm like, khatam bhi ho gaya. I'm like, now this episode, we can actually use this episode as a rebroadcast sometime in future. It will be timeless now. There is not much change coming.
This leak could have been an email.
Oh my God.
You have the title of the episode right there.
The title of the episode is sorted. This leak could have been an email. Amazing. But yeah, so anyway, so just to bring it back and in the spirit of simplified, let's start from as Mary Poppins said, from the very beginning. Not Mary Poppins, what was this? Sound of Music, no?
Sound of Music, yeah.
Yeah, so start from the very beginning. So firstly, it's been misquoted in many different ways. So the full Christian name is actually not the European Super League, it's the Super League.
Oh.
There is no European in there. They just called it the Super League because the term European Super League has been thrown around so much. The media just picked it up as European Super League and started talking about it. But the official Christian name is the Super League.
This is because Brexit, therefore, English clubs can't do Europe.
Yeah, there's nothing, no Europe in our name as
It's the
such.
first time that the Christian name has been shorter than the popular name, but move on.
Yeah. Yeah, but so what the league was as such, what it was specified to be was this league of 20 teams, but with 12 founding members. Now, these 12 founding members, even to those who don't follow football, will be the most familiar names in football. If you know anything, if you've ever heard about football from any rabid idiots like me, would also have heard of like clubs like Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico, Juventus, AC Milan, Inter Milan, and from England, Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Spurs, or Spurs as in Tottenham Hotspur. Now, these were the 12 founding teams. Now, these obviously are the 12 biggest teams in world football. So these teams, along with, they had kept 3 more spots open for other founding members to join in, would be classified as the founding members of the European Super League, have 5 rotating invited members in the league, and form this breakaway league where all these teams would play each other. Now, for the average supporter, and in fact, this also caused a lot of uproar in the US, because a lot of US sports people were like, the best teams all want to play each other. What's the big deal about that? Why is there such an uproar about all of this? Why it's such a bad thing? So these teams wanted to play each other. So before we get into what was wrong about the ESL and what was controversial, let's just take a brief overview of what is called the football pyramid. All right. So people have heard all these terms, Champions League, Premier League, then it's all damn confusing, right? So let's take any country, right? Any country has a bunch of clubs that are from within the country. So from the UK, you have clubs from Manchester, you have clubs from Liverpool, you have clubs from London like Chelsea. These are different clubs. They first and foremost play in their local domestic leagues, right? So every country has its own local domestic league. Now, the best teams each year, so either from England, the top 4, England and Spain, the top 4, from Germany, the three top teams, from Italy, the 2 top teams, all the top teams of the table every year are put together in a league called the Champions League. And they all play each other in the Champions League in a format of some sort. And that's for the elite teams, so to speak. Now, that's how the football pyramid works. And there is also, across all of these different pyramids, it's all, the important part to remember is every single qualification for every league, including the domestic leagues, is based on a system of promotion and relegation, right? So if you're in a league, so for example, in the Premier League, there are 20 teams. Every year, the bottom 3 teams go to the league below it, which is called the Championship. And the top 3 teams from the Championship qualify for the Premier League. Now, any team at any point can get relegated, and any team at any point can get promoted from a lower league to the higher league. So the fact that even
this is all on playing performance. This is all on playing performance. Yeah.
And too, it's
you
not
you can't
over
blow
a full
a horn
season
and get in.
Yeah. So you could have won the league 1 year.
Get in, it would be a toot and come in pyramid.
Wow.
Oh my God.
How long was it bubbling in, Naren?
My God, Naren.
Wow.
Wow. How do I follow that now?
I'll ask. I'll have I don't have a similar observation to follow up. I didn't want to ask you though. Seriously.
Go ahead.
Who can start a club? Like suppose we were in the UK.
So anyone can start any club. Anyone. Like you can literally gather a bunch of people in your neighborhood or anywhere at all.
Building society.
Purchase a ground and you have started a club.
So you need a ground. So you need a ground.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily also. You can rent a ground also.
You know these teams that call themselves like the Bolton Wanderers.
They won the league ones, have respect.
No, as in like why they call the Wanderers is because they don't have a fixed home stadium.
Oh, really? Is that why? Wow. In that case, can somebody explain to me why Sheffield Wednesday has a day of the week?
For Inter Milan and AC Milan, 2 of the biggest clubs in Europe, they have just one stadium.
They have one stadium and they share it. So
no stadium. We formed a football club. Yes.
Yeah. So, but you can form a team like just you meet at the local ground and you can play at Shivaji Park and form a club also. That's fine. But at the end of the day, the point is you can form a club. For the club to enter the pyramid, you have to perform at a certain level and you have to classify there. And the football pyramid also is much deeper. So what we usually see is just the top. We see the Premier League, right?
It's a football iceberg.
There's literally the tip of the iceberg. And below that, you have like some 10 levels of the pyramid where different levels of qualification and relegation are there. And so at the very bottom level, there are like amateur clubs and semi-professional clubs that people who are just having a kickabout on a Sunday. So it goes all the way to the top. So theoretically, what the pyramid does is it's based on meritocracy, right? So a player who plays on a ground for a local club on a Sunday can play in the Premier League someday. And a club that actually was at the bottom of the tier in 1 year, 4 years later or 5 years or 6 years, how many years it takes to ascend the pyramid, can eventually get to the top and win the Premier League.
That's the European dream.
Yeah, which is something what Leicester City in a way did, right? Leicester City was almost relegated from the Championship at one point in time. Their leading striker, Jamie Vardy, used to play for a non-league club at one point in time. And then afterwards, he became the Golden Boot winner in the year Leicester won the Premier League. So
they proved that they're not Leicester than anyone.
Yes, that also. Yes. So this football pyramid is therefore based on this ancient structure of meritocracy per se. And
one question at this point. And also, none of these, I mean, my assumption is none of these clubs really started out with a single owner or ownership. It was mostly like local people coming together.
Absolutely.
So it's not profit-minded, basically.
No, not at all. So it was basically what a lot of these clubs are called athletic clubs. So they were basically like, a lot of them were just like get a bunch of kids around, like akhadas, effectively. Like they were like Shiv Sena akhadas who are like kids are playing in the background and all that shit. Someone's doing Malcolm in the corner and some stuff like that. So there's this akhada feel which they started with. And eventually, of course, they gained prominence. They had players and all that stuff. And it became that much. And all of these clubs are also like really ancient. Like, for example, Liverpool was founded in 1892. And I mean, Narain was just a wee teenager at that point, but still, you must have remembered.
And Man United was famously Newton Heath FC, which started.
Newton Heath FC, exactly.
So you've kept this going. It's a Heath streak for you.
I think you're going to mention Newton Heath in some capacity in every episode now.
Yeah, and of course, the details for this can be heard on my other podcast, The Origin of Things. The title episode, we have a dog to thank for this, but that's another. But yeah, what you're saying is right? So it was all these industrial, I mean, all the Manchester clubs were basically all these ship guys or whatever,
ship building,
factory guys.
Whatever, industrial hubs who all formed their teams. Anyway, moving along, not to dwell on this part too long, but so there is this meritocracy that came along. Now, but what's happened over the last couple of decades or so? One very important thing that happened is this is not the first time there has been a breakaway league in football per se. The most successful breakaway league of all time is the Premier League itself. Right, the Premier League itself was initially the Premiership or the League or the League One, what was called the top league on the footballing pyramid. What the reason for the Premier League to kind of break away was, they broke away in the terms that they broke away from the Football Association of the time, and they formed a separate association which was owned by the clubs because they knew that they were the top earners. And there, what used to happen was, whether you're a top earner or a bottom earner, the money that anyone used to earn used to get distributed across the entire pyramid equally. So the Premier League came and said that, hey guys, we earn far more money. We have to buy really good players and stuff. So we are going to form a separate league, which will be associated with your football league, but the money will remain in the Premier League only. We're not going to pay everyone else, right? Because the Premier League earns a lot. We need to spend a lot. So we are keeping our own money. So,
but that's distributed equally amongst all clubs in the Premier League?
Yes, it's this. So what they did was, so that's where the Premier League also works on that principle, where the money gets distributed evenly. Like there is a TV revenue money and there is a prize money based on position, as well as equal distribution of TV revenue, especially if everyone's playing. So for example, if Liverpool is playing Burnley, now obviously common sense will dictate that there are not going to be equal number of Burnley fans watching as many as Liverpool fans might be watching. But the money gets split down the middle. Burnley gets just as much money as Liverpool gets for that match. So there is that some level of equitableness there. Now, obviously, this is where the rift starts coming in. So why the Super League was formed? Now, these top leagues across the entire footballing pyramid, across different countries also, realize that, they have this thing where they're earning a lot of money. Their top league teams are who everyone wants to watch. They have this massive supporter bases and all that stuff. But they are not earning as much as they could in this particular scenario. So if they are not earning as much as they could, then why should they contribute and like kind of bring up this Burnley and West Ham and Leicester City and all these other clubs when they themselves are the money makers? So they decided to kind of say that, you know what, we are going to split away and we are going to form our own league in our own way, where we will reserve the right for whatever money we earn for ourselves and not be dividing it to like all these other teams. So now these guys have also said, and also what's the big monetary advantage? So let me give you a scale of the money in the Champions League. Now the Champions League is where, like I mentioned, the top teams of every country play together in Europe. These teams, say the team who wins the Champions League, and that's an insanely difficult task. Not every team can do it. It's not something you can do every year.
So by definition, only one can do, yeah.
Only one can, and this is the best among the best, right? So champion among champions kind of thing. The team that wins the Champions League wins about 100 million euros every year, right? And you probably can make that achievement once every 10 years if you're lucky. Otherwise, a lot of teams haven't ever done it as well. So you can maximum win about 100 million euros. But when you look at the ESL, the structure was such that the founding members who could never get relegated would make 300 million euros just for showing up, because they eliminated all the middlemen, all the teams who were non-performing, all of that stuff, and just kept the cream for themselves. Right. And they said that just showing up will earn you 300 million euros. So that's the immediate appeal for that. The other thing being that also a lot of these clubs have a very pressing need because they have a lot of debt. So like some clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona, especially with the pandemic going on right now and having lost a lot of revenue to not having fans in the stadium, they already had debt before, but now their debt has deepened to an extent that they are both like about $1 billion in debt each.
Didn't the other clubs have debt then, Shrikit? Or
yeah, so that's where even the Premier League teams and all that. So there was a lot of news over the last year where club employees got furloughed. And I mean, they have to continue, even when the football was not being played, they have to continue playing these multi-million-dollar salaries to their players, right? The players are not going to be like, okay, we're not playing, so we won't get paid. So they got paid their salaries. The clubs still aren't allowed to get fans in the stadium. So they're not making any money from fan revenue, what do we say, bums on seats revenue. Yeah. So they're losing money there and they have to pay these massive salaries. So all the clubs are actually really, really suffering from financial point of view. But this is actually nothing. So the big clubs, obviously, because of their massive piles of money, are still somewhat cushioned. They are having difficulty, but cushioned. But there are a lot of clubs that, especially in the UK, which are literally shutting doors. Like a club called Bury FC, B-U-R-Y, Bury FC, which was
exactly. Yeah.
Trivia question.
Yeah. So Bury FC shut down. It's no longer a club.
Bury got buried. Sorry.
Yeah, pretty much. So they went out of business. They couldn't manage anything. So they basically shuttered doors and the club ceased to be. As a 100 plus year old club that just died during the pandemic. So the pandemic is having real financial implications across the entire pyramid for all the clubs. So in this environment, they were like, you know what, we need to make money and we need to do this. So let the best teams play each other. And so the other argument that they had was on quality. They are like, you know what, the fans in the Champions League, when Liverpool plays Real Madrid or Barcelona, it's a blockbuster tie where everyone wants to watch. Yeah. Right. But when, say, PSV Eindhoven wants to play Ajax, that's still a decent tie. When a Watford wants to play a Burnley or a Leicester wants to play a Galatasaray, right? Nobody wants to watch these matches. Is what the assumption is. There are fans, but this is not global appeal. Yeah. It's not the blockbuster matches.
It's like my Cooper Edge match. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
My uncle was very excited, but
exactly. But their argument is that, I mean, for such small matches, they don't deserve to be given an equal stage to these other matches. So why don't we just get the best teams into a league, have the best play the best all the time, so that everyone gets great product and watch it all the time? Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want to call out the distinction when you say best as in most moneyed teams. And
exactly. So and that's a very important point. Yeah.
When they were set up, it was based on the assumption that it was a local club for players and the local fans. Yeah. And sometime in the last 20, 30 or even more years when TV came into being, the equation completely changed from everyone getting equitable money for the number of players to everyone getting a share based on the number of viewers they are able to attract. And therefore, obviously, like once the capitalist thing kicks in, you get there is a revenue model based on TV viewers, which is practically like 7 billion viewers or whatever. Therefore, owners came into the mix and changed this whole model where it was local clubs and players versus definition in terms of revenue and possible money up for grabs, right?
Absolutely. In fact, so that's where. So once you look at that, and that's a great transition into saying that what was the big opposition to this stuff, right? And that's where it comes down to is that what they wanted to do was there is a status quo of how football is today. Right, there is the status quo of these clubs being the most moneyed clubs, these clubs being the biggest clubs in some way, or among the more successful clubs. They wanted to take this status quo and lock it. Right. So once you lock this status quo, saying these clubs are great, now these clubs will continue being great into the future. They are guaranteed greatness. Right. So because the point is, 30 years ago, Chelsea was a nothing team. Manchester City did not have any success. Tottenham, even 10 years ago, wasn't really a big club, right? Liverpool, in fact, 10 years ago, when I started supporting Liverpool, was actually finishing 8th in the Premier League and didn't even come in the Champions League.
Yes, 7th as of this recording, but anyway.
Yeah, they're 7th as of this recording.
Mourinho burst onto the scene because Porto won the Champions League
exactly
when they were like a nothing club.
They were a nothing team like, at that time.
Now, people don't know what Porto is.
Exactly.
Not as much as others. Yeah.
And if you were to see in the late 70s, in the mid 70s to the 80s, one of the biggest teams around was Ajax, right?
Oh, yeah.
15, 20 years ago, Leeds United was considered to be among the top 4 clubs in the UK, right? So the status quo changes over time. Status quo keeps changing. And what this pyramid has allowed to do is that it's allowed for periods of success to have for different clubs, right? Different clubs can rotate and the period of success can come and go, and clubs can come into prominence and clubs can leave prominence.
Just like how Leicester is considered a pretty good team right now.
Yeah, I mean, Leicester was at best a championship or League One team. And now they are right now in the top 4. They're 3rd in the league right now. And they were champions a few years ago. And now they're considered to be at the very minimum a top 6, top 8 team. Right. And that's a huge transformation. And that's happened because of this pyramid structure. But what this would
compare and contrast this to the American model where it's purely like owner driven and there's no concept of promotion or relegation. Everyone gets to play all the time. And then it's up to their own marketing to, create those brands and profit.
Absolutely.
So it's a completely different model.
So if you look at baseball, the Yankees are always winning. The Red Sox are always big because those are big market teams. It's defined on the market and their success is almost guaranteed because of that. And because of the fact that there is no relegation or promotion, those teams will continue to remain the biggest teams. And the small teams have very little hope of becoming really big teams as well.
Yeah. So, but even in the NBA where there is no it's based on draft picks and stuff like that. Yeah. I guess there's no promotion or relegation. I mean, you have these periods of teams becoming big, like Chicago Bulls nowhere now, but they were big once upon a time.
That's a good point also because while in the US there's no relegation and promotion, they uniformly across all sports have drafts.
Yeah.
And drafts are good levelers in some way. But the US dynamics are different. But in the UK, there is no draft. Best players go to the best teams they decide to go to. So
based on money, yeah.
Based on money. And there is also another fundamental in the US sports called the salary cap. Salary cap being as a team in the entire league, you can only spend a certain amount of money. You can't spend beyond that. You're not allowed to. And that is there in the US teams, and in the UK, in the football pyramid, there is no salary cap. You can pay like $1 billion to Messi if you wanted to tomorrow.
It's weirdly socialist in American sports and weirdly capitalist in European
exactly.
Fascinating.
So the point is that both the sets of different sporting environments, the UK and the US, have their own checks and balances.
Yeah.
What the Super League would do is remove the set of checks and balances that exist in the UK pyramid without bringing any of the checks and balances from the US pyramid, right? And that's what the fundamental opposition to the league, the ESL was. Also,
if I may sum up the opposition to the ESL, it was because the big players were getting all the checks and there wasn't too much of a balance.
And all the clubs were they had a lot of hearts. but they went looking for diamonds, and now everyone's coming after them with spades.
Amazing.
I also took the opportunity to actually once and for all find out what a hotspur is. It turns out it's an actual word.
Is it
fiery person? It's a fiery person.
Oh.
It's a fiery
person.
No, but then it has to
Fiery
come
person.
from some other thing, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's archaic. That much I didn't decide.
I thought the spurs were those,
exactly.
the things at the back of the shoes that cowboys used to wear.
To make the horse go faster.
To persuade, to gently persuade the horses to run faster.
Yeah. I don't think that was very gentle. But anyway. Yeah. So, but the other reasons also, and there's a slightly more. There was this projection of what the leagues would be like if the ESL were to come into play. It would really highlight the starkness of the contrast that would happen. Like the 15 founding teams. There were 12 that announced. The 15 founding teams had no concept of relegation, but there would be 5 rotating teams every year, right? So, for example, after the 15 teams were in place, they would say invite a Porto and an Ajax and all these other teams. Now, imagine
that's based on their discretion or performance.
Discretion. So it was discretion or performance. What they'd probably do was take all the other smaller leagues and invite the next layer of biggest teams who performed really well that year.
Or they didn't get to that point before that it got shut down.
Exactly. But what they do is this was 5 teams were rotating every year. So what could potentially happen is you could have a group stage where an Ajax won the group stage. Tottenham potentially lost every match they played and they got there. Ajax won their group stage, won the quarters, won the semis, got to the final and probably lost to Real Madrid, for example, right? Ajax would still be out of the Super League the next year while Tottenham would continue to remain in the Super League, despite having performed like significantly worse than Ajax because of the fact that they had that status quo advantage. So it's literally like I will stay because of my status rather than because of my performance.
Yeah. I owned the bat, therefore, like I'll always bet.
The fact that I was a founding member gives me this privilege of doing this, right? And also, what happens is this would be classic rich gets richer politics because the teams outside the ESL, because the ESL teams year on year will be getting a guaranteed 300 million euros. Teams outside the ESL would be getting like a fraction of that from their domestic leagues, right? And if they continue to get that, these teams would have so many monetary resources that none of the other teams would be able to compete with them. So that would literally, even in performance, solidify the status quo. That these guys would get financially like massively doped and everyone else is feeding off scraps, right? And finally, also because of the fact that the ESL would become so important for these guys to play in, the domestic leagues, because they earn a fraction of it, they start feeling second string teams in domestic leagues. So a Premier League match between Liverpool and Manchester United is not as important as a Super League match. So if a Super League match is there, they probably might even rest and play their youth team in the domestic league, but they'll probably play the best teams only in the Super League. So what this would do is pretty much screw the entire pyramid, the finances, the advantages, the ability to perform and grow as a club across the entire pyramid for the benefit of these top 12 clubs.
Yeah.
Right?
But why did they announce such a league if like basically no one was?
So that's where there was a miscalculation. So a couple of things. First, the ridiculous part was, so there was a bad miscalculation on part of first, let's understand who actually did this. We keep referring to as Liverpool, Manchester United, all these guys wanted to break away. This actually comes down to what is exactly a club right now. As you mentioned earlier, Tony, these clubs were initially started by local people and like just a local guy who's running an athletic club or something like that. These guys are starting these clubs. Now these clubs are all owned by foreign owners. Like, for example, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal are run by American owners. Manchester City is owned by Abu Dhabi Group, which is like the country, basically, state fund is owning it. Chelsea is owned by Russian Roman Abramovich. So
United is listed.
I'm sorry? United is listed on the stock market, on the US stock market, like the Glazers, and they're running it. So basically it was just these owners who got together on a conference call on a Zoom and said,
like we are doing.
Yeah.
Like four privileged men.
Yeah. And they said, screw it. I don't want 100 million every year. I want 300 million every year. What is the fastest way to get it? This. So let's do it. I own the club. I do it.
So there was
Beside the
actually an
point,
ad by
what do we do
Heineken.
what do we do if a Russian oligarch decides to buy Simplified? Do we still continue? Or do we...
I welcome my Russian overlords.
Got that out of the way.
And on that note, it's time for a commercial break. No.
Kazakhstan, greatest country in the world.
No, I was just saying, so Heineken actually came up with an ad, right, that pretty much spoke to how the league was formed, saying, don't drink and start a league. So,
It's like a drunken afternoon with your buddies and you're like, chal, league start karte hain.
And
they're like,
this was
chal.
actually, sort of daftness elevated to an art form. If they really, nominally they wanted control, right? So they didn't want UEFA and FIFA administrating everything.
Because they take a cut of the profits as well.
I do not understand why it was so difficult to have a, sort of qualifier as well. That would have overruled a lot of objections.
But that's essentially what the Champions League is, no?
Yeah, but that's essentially what they wanted to avoid, because the whole point is these guys were like, we are followed no matter whether we are in the league or not. Yeah. We are the best followed teams. We want a guarantee of getting the money every year. We don't want this uncertainty. Yeah. We don't want the uncertainty of qualification every year. We want guaranteed cash flow.
They underestimated the passion that fans have for their clubs,
and also
for the league as a whole, right? What is
and for the league as a whole.
What is heartening in a way was for Liverpool fans and United fans not to support their clubs, but for this entire system.
They want a contest. They want fairness. They want a sporting encounter.
Or is that too optimistic a reading, Sriket?
It was, to be fair, yes, there was massive opposition by fans, and yes, there is definitely merit. Leicester City would not have happened without the football pyramid. So there is, and it's not in old times, it's happened recently, so it can happen. But the problem is, there was a beautiful comic that I saw somewhere online where it's basically there's this huge footballing cow, right? And there's a UEFA and FIFA sucking on the teats of the cow, and they are basically pushing away ESL from the teats of the cow. So the point is that there is UEFA and FIFA already pretty much run cartels of football. They are on their face more democratic about it. The ESL was just blatant. In some ways, ESL was the Trump of the footballing pyramid. Like they came in and they said, I don't give a shit. Rapist says, I'm going to say what the hell I want to, right? And there was a huge backlash because they're like, oh, you're such an offensive person and you're so blatant in your avarice, right? But here, these guys, actually, UEFA and FIFA, the way they run the Champions League, the way the footballing pyramid, even the Premier League right now runs, the rich still do get richer, but there is a veneer of meritocracy that it comes along with.
It is blatancy.pptx.
Yeah. So like, for example, they did this thing called football. They tried to do one thing called FFP in football, which is the best ever, right? They might as well call it FFFP, like farcical final play, which is
it's a nice
entirely like there is no farcical financial fair play. But because there is no financial fairness in football, right? They have no checks and balances of how much money a particular club can spend. How do we protect the smaller teams? The teams, even before the ESL came along, smaller teams like Bury, as we discussed, died and stuff like that. So football down the pyramid is actually in a really bad state. But they were the status quo and they preserved it because of their veneer of meritocracy. So that's where, and the thing that the ESL guys did really badly was they decided to announce this big thing and like show their might without having any kind of allies anywhere else. It was literally these 6 owners and their executives against the whole world. They fought against, they said they'll take on FIFA, UEFA, the broadcasters, the coaches, the players, the fans. They wanted to take on everyone and said, F you, I'm going to do this. And so eventually this larger footballing pyramid just rebelled against it, and then purely on a PR, they could have still gone ahead with it. There was nothing stopping them. But it's purely from PR point of view, they were like, this is just going to be far too messy for us to get through. And that caused the hubris and that outcry, and the swiftness of the outcry was what actually brought it all down. So while I agree, there is a lot of organized outcry that happened from fans. I think the biggest thing was because the fans outcry had a massive platform with all the broadcasters. It was endorsed by the existing leading footballing bodies, which is where this 3-day collapse happened. versus had it only been a fan-led movement, it probably would have gone on for ages, because there are plenty of fan-led movements that go on for ages and ages, but they don't get anywhere.
Interesting. And footballers also, right? I remember seeing like Jordan Henderson putting out a statement and stuff.
Yeah. So Jordan Henderson, in fact, a couple of hours before the league collapsed, and that's key, because had they put it after the league collapsed, everyone would have been like, hey, Jana. But they put it like 4 hours before the league collapsed, was every player together. And I mean, even the statement that they released was basically, we don't like it and we don't want it to change. That's literally the wording of it, saying we support fans. They didn't really say that, we won't play or anything.
Oh, diplomatic, like tightrope, they have to.
But there were also other implications, right? Like how the ICL, the Indian Cricket League, got finally shut down was basically...
So the UEFA and FIFA pretty much put it up saying that, listen, boss, if you want to play in the ESL guys also very nicely said, we'll definitely be playing in our domestic leagues, but we'll also play in the ESL. But the FIFA UEFA said, guys, if you want to play in that league, now go play in that league only. You're not allowed to play anywhere else. Right? So they said,
how do they get to say that?
Because they control. They run the leagues, right? They are see, that's what,
because
right?
That was a huge travesty. Shutting down ICL. Not only did they shut down ICL, they hounded every cricketer who participated. It was horrible. I stopped watching cricket around that time. It was. I abhor the IPL with a vengeance. It's ridiculous. It's just the most ridiculous sporting event in this country.
Which is exactly, I mean, think of the IPL. It was a breakaway league. It was, I mean, if you remember, I still remember when it started, I was just like, this is obscene. Like the way they are doing it, the money that they're throwing around, the way the football, I mean, for me, cricket was still something sacred that, it was some meritocracy kind of game. And I was just like, this is just like, this is arcade football, cricket, like what you're getting, like a bunch of players inside, get them to all go and hit sixes, and that's about it. Which is exactly what the ESL was proposed to be. In fact, Florentino, it's a good point you brought up, Naren, because Florentino Perez also kind of made this like sweeping statement in one of his interviews during this ESL time, saying young people aren't interested in 90 minutes of football. Almost nodding to the fact that they would kind of make a T20 of football as well, where they'll get an arcade version of it and they'll get like the best players to maybe kick
penalties, right? So
so just kick a whole bunch of penalties all the time
on either side in the end of the game.
You're saying the format itself would have changed, and Naren, that's a fascinating debate to have. But I don't think we should talk about
this is a different track.
The T20fication of cricket, which Tony and I have our own views on. I don't think the IPL is completely a bad thing, even though I'm not like a big fan of it.
Absolutely.
But on this thing, so in the ESL, was the format of football itself
no
changed? Because my guess was the 0-0 draw that would be there in the ESL would just be more enthralling than that.
No. They had no. I mean, they had no interest in football, right? They only had interest in money. Let's be very clear about that. So
as a result, you need more goals or whatever.
No. The idea was that if more popular teams play each other, there would be more.
So that's what I'm saying. No, that I understand. So that is cream rising to the top. What I'm saying is asking.
Not cream.
The richest, fair enough. Fair enough. But what I'm asking is, will the format of the game itself change?
So not in the original proposal, definitely not. What they proposed was, but it was hinted. It was hinted because Florentino Perez actually gave this quote saying that young people are not interested in watching 90-minute football anymore.
Fair enough.
Right. And so they had made that statement, and there was some hinting on how maybe the format can be reduced and all that stuff. And unlike cricket, where there wasn't as much outcry, I mean, there was outcry for T20. In football, the format of the game is very sacred to a lot of fans. And even young people, actually, the product that is there currently is a good product. It's a thriving product. It's not really under any kind of danger. The money is still flowing through the entire game. So that's where they face their opposition, saying that this is just self-interest of trying to fix something for themselves that isn't really broken. And that's where the big problem happened. And so again, coming back to the sanctions, one was, okay, you can't play anything, which would have been a blanket ban. But the other sanctions that were suggested were, which including now can continue to be, considering that these teams that declared that they will go to a league, now that they have backed off, doesn't mean that they won't be still punished. The punishment can be anything from obviously monetary punishments to some of these teams might be docked points. There is also a conversation about how the teams that were involved, some of the teams involved in the Super League are currently in the Champions League semi-finals, like Manchester City, like Chelsea. So there is conversation about even like getting them kicked out from there right now, Real Madrid. So Liverpool
But
fans are really
realistically,
excited.
none of that will happen, right?
Realistically, no. Realistically, it will be too much of a overkill, and it will ruin their own product in some ways if they do that. So it looks like it might be something that's hushed off behind. There's some monetary fines. In extreme cases, some points might be docked, but there will be no other really big things. But what was also discussed before when the league was still on was that to kind of put pressure further beyond the clubs, they were also saying that the players who play in the ESL would be banned from their national teams.
Yeah.
So won't be picked, just like was with the ISL, right? ICL in some way, where they said that there will be national bans. So there was also conversation about how national team bans would happen, which would be ridiculous considering how these top teams contribute a large chunk of their nation's teams.
Yeah.
Players constitute massive tasks. So, I mean, like for example, the English national team would be entirely second string team would have to play if these top clubs players went away. So that was the other part of it. So overall, in some ways, while yes, definitely, in some way there was a line in the sand drawn and absolute greed, outright greed was halted. It's also thrown into focus. I wouldn't say that this is a celebration moment where the good has won over evil. Because also what's happened and what's gone under the radar over here is that this conversation was being had with the UEFA for a long time by these big clubs. And one of the concessions they have made is that they're changing the format of the Champions League, where what they will be doing is while the normal qualification will still work, they are including more, they're expanding it to 36 teams. And the 4 additional teams that they're adding to the UEFA Champions League might come from past performance merit. So teams who have great coefficients, who have performed well in the past, might get a side entrance into the Champions League.
So as a result of the ESL, the Champions League might actually...
It has already. That has already been announced.
So your Trump analogy goes even further. I stick to my theory that Trump was actually a secret Democrat who was put into the system just to accelerate change.
Potentially. Yeah. But no, in some ways, I mean, to be fair,
one good outcome of this whole thing is like how there was FIFA, the game first, and Football Manager. I see the potential for a video game called Football Administrator. And you have to create your own breakaway.
Reminds me of an old Bob Hope joke. Okay, so back in the day, the Russians went one up on America by sending Sputnik, and the US was completely caught flat-footed. It was the first satellite in orbit. And they immediately came out with their own satellite, which basically went 200 feet and then plonked into the sea of the Florida coast, which promptly these people called a Kaputnik. So, and everyone was America being America. So Bob Hope put everything in perspective. He says all it means is their German Jewish engineers are better than our German engineers. So this entire episode only means that our money grubbing administrators are better than their money grubbing.
Yeah, our money grubbing is more honorable than your money grubbing is. That's what it is all at, and that's brilliant.
Nice,
and that's a great place to close this, I think, also because I mean, I think we've gone on for long enough. But so I hope you guys
longer than the league.
So I think they're longer than the ESL lasted for.
I have a couple of questions, Riket. So you said points can be docked. What are the other ways for which a team can actually have points docked? Like, are there any other ways? Like, this is the equivalent of like, in cricket, you're getting these random things like timed out and obstructed the field and
handling the ball.
And misspelled it's on a tweet, all these random reasons.
So some teams get points docked for bad financial management. So teams go into administration in the UK, they have bad financial management. They are not able to pay their players' salaries on time and stuff, is when their points get docked.
Wow.
So they get points docked for that. Teams also get points docked for unethical stuff. Like there was conversation about there was this one Bielsa who's the manager of Leeds United. He my God, Naren. Yeah, he spied. My God, Naren, I'm very impressed. So Bielsa's management team actually spied on the training of another team. And there was conversation. They weren't docked back then, but there was conversation about docking points for
Is that illegal in marketing? We call that ComScan.
So,
spy on somebody else.
I have to bring up the best football spying story, which happened, I think, in the last World Cup. Was the Swedish team was supposed to play South Korea. And so the Swedish staff went to the training of the South Korean teams to watch them. So South Korea took advantage of the fact that these guys, these Europeans cannot recognize any of our players. So they changed their jerseys to like they all exchanged their jerseys. So the people who are watching them have no idea who's playing because they relied on the names of the jerseys. So like,
Incredible.
Reverse racism.
I think amazing. I think we should end this episode by saying if we were to actually start a league, like what difference would it bring in? So if I were to start a league, I would bring in a new format of football, which I thought should always exist, and have like multiple teams playing one match. I'm like, in all sports, there's always one team versus the other. And football, I think, is one sport where you can just add like a couple of extra goals and have 4 teams go at it. So that way you get more. You get the league running quick also. So Liverpool,
this is like your Maharashtra election.
City. Yeah. Thank you. But like, I'm surprised that doesn't happen. I'm sure this innovation has happened in Shivaji Park somewhere. In the same match.
No, I'm sure. I mean, lack of space, then that will definitely happen. And so, yeah, I mean, like you were saying, for me, actually, I mean, this is more. I always have wondered what football would be like if they had rolling substitutions. If like they had absolute like unlimited rolling substitutions, because of the fact that football is all about, how can a player last for 90 minutes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Versus recently I've started following a little bit of American football just to understand its rules and stuff. There's so many specialized positions in American football. Like one player has to do one exact thing. Like there is a guy who's a kicker whose only job is to stand at one particular point and to kick the ball. And he won't do anything else in the entire game. Right. So there's so many specialized positions. So I mean, I would wonder what kind of specialized, like, would you have a striker whose only job is to come in and stand around that box, and the moment the ball comes there, he has to kick and then leave the field? So I mean, that would be incredible if he had specialized positions and rolling substitutions.
Yeah. So Neymar's specialty would be to fall down, making him literally a rolling substitute. I'm very proud of myself for that. That was good. That was good. I bet when you started this episode, Srikanth, you did not expect Naren to have knowledge about Leeds managers and me to make a Neymar rolling.
Neymar joke. That's true. I have been very pleasantly surprised today.
I strongly suspect Srikanth is going to take to drink now. He's been rattled.
Oh man, no, this has been super entertaining for me.
More than the years ever.
Yeah, but on the point about, and this is completely unrelated to football, on the point of the jersey stuff that Tony, you were saying, I found one very incredibly delightful thing that I think it was Leonardo DiCaprio or Daniel Radcliffe, one of those guys that done, where the paparazzi keep hounding them every day, right? So then trying to take photos of them all differently. So Daniel Radcliffe, what he decided to do was for 6 months, he wore the same outfit whenever he left the house. And what that did was paparazzi stopped following him because his picture was, because they couldn't say that they have taken a fresh picture. So the pictures of him became entirely useless. So when he left the house, he just wore the same outfit for 6 months. And no paparazzi stopped following him then.
Brilliant.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Are we good,
so anyway,
gentlemen?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's great. So Naren, do you want to sign off?
Yeah.
Stay united, actually, my
Please don't.
So stay safe, stay
not so super, I say.
Not so super league, and stay simplified.
And I have lost my bet with myself because I thought that in a 50-minute episode about talking about all this, Tony would have said the word Kerry Packer at least once. I lost that. So see you
I mean, I said breakaway league and Tony still didn't say Kerry Packer.
We reached as far as ICL, so that's
All right.
Excellent. Thanks everyone. Guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Would like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, thewholetruthfoods.com, Seat, PayPal, and Cred. We thank you all for your support. Tune into The Note, where Maruk Inayat talks to Dr. Bipin Joshi about the second wave of COVID. He calls it no less than World War III. On The Habit Coach, Ashton was joined by Yoshita Dave, who's a sex educator and intimacy coach. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam Gupta was joined by Amit Thakkar and Hiral Jain of Market Pulse Technologies, and they talked about trading in Indian markets. All Things Policy by the Takshashila Institute had on board Mihir Mahajan and Pranay Kotastane to talk about the recent changes in the Indian intellectual property front. You should definitely check out the Cyrus Says episode with Ace casting director Mukesh Chabra. They discussed some of his best work. We also had Ira Mukhoti, who has authored various books on history and mythology from a female gaze. The IPL season's in full swing, and we have Edges and Sledges in English and Khel Niti in Hindi if you want to check out cricket content. Really great conversations on both of those shows. Do check those out. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.